we all have 24 hours. Everybody's 24 hours has 60 minutes in an hour. Everybody's, all that, right? But time isn't linear. And this is where we can bend it. So time is linear if you only look at it as a function of from how long is it from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. However, there are a lot of things you can do to impact the productivity of that hour, the joyfulness of that hour, what that hour does for your bigger picture, right?
I am so excited to announce the launch of an innovative new product from Vista Apex Solutions called the Endocator. The Endocator is the first ever chair-side device that actually allows you to verify and test whether your canals are clean before you obturate. Utilizing ATP as a biomarker, this device is able to let you know that the canals are clean before finishing a case. How valuable is that? Visit Vista Apex Solutions at vistaapex.com to learn more about the Endocator. Because remember, you can't see clean on an x-ray. Welcome back to On the Cusp. I'm your host, Dr. Brett Gilbert. I'm really excited about today's episode. We're going to invest some time here in this episode, but as we're going to learn from our amazing guest, there's an art to bending time. And that really has my intrigue. And I'm really, really excited to learn more about our guest and her development of this concept. So Michelle Niemeyer is a lawyer and attorney. She's a keynote speaker. She's a workshop facilitator. She's a coach. And she has developed this concept of the art of bending time. And it's something that I'm really, really excited to learn more about, because I think we all recognize that when it comes to wealth in our life, the time wealth that we have is so limited in terms of we just get as much as we get, and we don't know if we've got 50 years or 50 seconds left in the bank. And so how can we use our time the most effectively, most productively, but often allow ourselves to incorporate rest, recovery. And as we'll talk about, a big highlight of today will again, of course, be burnout, which is something Michelle and I have connected on significantly. So Michelle Niemeyer, welcome to On the Cusp.
Thank you so much. And I love your intro. I have to say, one of the things I like to say to people is we all have the same 24 hours in a day. And somehow some people manage to do incredible things with that amount of time in a day, and other people don't get much done at all. So why the difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the concept of the art of bending time has to do with how you pack more into those moments
Beautiful.
and how you get what you need out of the time you have.
Beautiful. And I'm sorry. Go ahead. I want to dive into it a little bit more in depth. I have a couple questions around it, but before we get started with that, and before we bend time into this episode, which I'm excited to do, I always like to start out with a question. Sorry, Laura. It's just Michelle. My apologies. Michelle, what are you feeling grateful for as you sit here today?
Really, honestly, the ability to be sitting here today. I made a decision about 6 years ago that I would get out of practicing law and get into coaching and speaking and this work full time. And I've finally been doing it full time for about a year now, which is just wonderful, because I always felt that a through line for me in my life was mentoring. It was essentially coaching in whatever context I was in, whether it was working with people in my law practice, whether it was working with people in the community. I was always doing some aspect of coaching, mentoring, and that sort of work. I love to see the light come up in somebody's eyes when they get it and they like something clicks for them. So that's really, I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, and as you say that, as I'm looking in your eyes, I see that light.
Hmm.
And I did when we met, before the episode to connect and to discuss, and the idea of being able to sort of make this massive transition from a busy lawyer who was depended upon significantly, who took their client's caseload very personally into heart, and then to actually transition and as we may discuss, depending on how much of your story you want to share, how you actually unwound your practice as well, which I found very inspiring in the way that you approach that. So, okay, so I cut you off, but I wanted to talk about, burnout and the art of bending time. But can you tell me a little bit about how burnout has actually reshaped your mindset, your life, and most certainly your career?
Yeah. And I will say it wasn't burnout per se. It was the results from burnout because I was like a lot of people who didn't really know I was being burned out. I like to describe burnout as being like a lobster being cooked in a bottle in a pot of water, right? You don't know that you're being cooked until it's too late. And I had that happen to me. I was not one of those unhappy lawyers who hated their job, and there's plenty of those. I actually really loved what I did for many years. I worked really long hours. I gave up personal things on a regular basis. I got involved in community things when I wasn't involved at work. I was on an elected board for 9 years. I was an advocate for my community related to a big waterfront project where I lived that could have taken away our waterfront parks and turned them into a convention center. I actually spent my birthday at a city commission meeting in Miami once because I was committed to that, right? And you hit a point where all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my God, I'm giving and giving and giving and giving." And then you step back and the moment for me that I realized like I was just giving more than I was receiving, so to speak. um, I had run for city commission and I had had a lot of people pressuring me to run because they felt I could help them. But some of those same people were afraid of the person I ran against. He was very retaliatory against businesses that supported other people, et cetera. And so I found myself in a position of a week after I lost this election that I'd put a ton of time and effort into. I get a letter in the mail. It doesn't have there's no return address and it's not signed by anybody. It's signed by your friends on XYZ street. And it starts with the line, "Dear Michelle, you need to help us with this problem they had." And that the person who they had shut their doors, literally shut doors in my face because they were so loyal to this person. The minute he was reelected, he didn't do anything to help them on something he promised them. And I remember going away and thinking, what? Right. And I gave away all this time and all this effort. And as much as I love to do that when I'm seeing that light in someone's eyes, when I'm feeling the impact of what I'm doing, the lack of feeling that impact can be really hard. And I think for a lot of people, I know for me, that was a big contributor to burnout. When you practice law, it can take years to get to a result. And the entire time that you're doing that, you're working really hard, you're meeting deadlines, you're giving up sometimes things to meet those deadlines. And then in the end, it's almost like you've got battle fatigue. By the time it's over, you don't even feel the joy of the success.
Mhm.
You're kind of done, which I find that for lawyers, I know that's hard. And I'm sure with other kinds of jobs as well, it's not a job you can walk away and leave it. And, that can be frustrating. So what I found happened to me was first I got burned out and then I did some things to work on that. I exercised. I did things that I knew would help stress, but it wasn't until I got an autoimmune disease diagnosis, which was after that I realized, wow, like there's so many things that I can do. And I really kind of dove headfirst into learning all about holistic health. And I went to a health coaching school for a year so that I could learn about how do you address autoimmunity from a functional medicine perspective. Because at the time, and it's still kind of true, it's becoming less true, but at the time, really the medical doctors weren't recognizing how much you could accomplish with things like nutrition and exercise and stress relief. And I was looking at a diagnosis of something called PBC, which at the time when you looked it up on Google, I was seeing a lot of scary things like 10 years from diagnosis, I could be looking at a transplant.
Mm.
That didn't happen. 10 years happened this winter and I haven't had a transplant. So I'm good, right? In fact, I've been able to reverse the damage to my liver significantly. It's in the stage 0, which is like there's not damage that's noticeable, particularly to my liver, which there was when I started it with stage 2. So, that's something that that was the beginning of this. That was that sort of diving in, learning about taking care of myself because frankly, I was scared I was going to die. I'm not sure I would have done what I did if I hadn't had a fear of death driving me.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't have that fear of death driving them. So there's not a reason to go as extreme as I did. But in doing that, I learned that there are so many different components. It's not like it's one thing that helps you feel better. It's a lot of different things and they all kind of come together. And, can I say that nutrition fixed me? No. Can I say that exercise fixed me? No, I can't. Can I say that stress reduction and nothing else? No. But I think all of those things together allow your body and your mind to work symbiotically in a way that heals you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really important to note, is the I like how you said that it wasn't burnout, it was the impact of burnout that really is what reshaped things for you. And I love how you sort of dove into your own health. And I think, and you can answer, but it seems very consistent with those I've interviewed that have left their profession because of either burnout or just feeling like unfulfilled or what have you, that the ultimate goal is to first help self and then be able to put this effort, this commitment to service in doing the same to help others. And so I acknowledge you, and you're one of a handful that I've interviewed that have made this switch, and all of them, not surprisingly or not surprisingly, they feel really fulfilled in what they're doing now. So I really acknowledge you for this. And it sounds like you had taken on just such a lion's share. And, there's an interesting connection between, here you're an attorney, I'm a dentist, and yet that same, giving, driving yourself toward, exhaustion in an effort to, serve these other people and to be what everyone expects you to be and to fulfill and push through all the discomfort and ultimately autoimmune, different health disorders. Some of the things that we see, we know there's a tremendous mind body connection. And so I really acknowledge that you, number one, are doing so well with your health. I'm so happy for you with that. And that also you're now in such a wonderful position to help others. And I love that you went into a coaching program. It seems like your journey has been fueled by educating yourself first, which is
Oh,
really
yeah.
phenomenal.
I've done a lot to educate myself. Having been introduced, I started that journey. I was a Beachbody coach for a little while being about 8 years, but I signed up for the discount and I never thought I'd be going to rah rah fests full of people in workout clothes, like doing things in the streets in Nashville and whatever. It was a riot. It was fun. But what I learned was that there's this whole world of something they call personal development, which I was never exposed to before that. And that made a big difference for me. Some of the stuff I learned in my health coaching school was aligned with the personal development that I was exposed to, but not all of it. And I think really all these things have layered upon layered themselves to where now I have a lot of different angles that I can approach these things from. One of the things I've learned that I think is probably the most important of all is I used to be I won't say reactive in a sense of I would scream and yell or anything because I wouldn't. One of the things they teach you in law and it's, really trained into you and it's necessary is that you don't show your emotion. You go into trial and you do what you're doing and you can't stand there and start screaming and yelling or getting mad at somebody or even showing it on your face, right? So you learn to stifle your feelings so that you don't respond. And that's something that I learned. I actually had to kind of learn to feel. It was, not only where do you feel this, or how do you feel this, but what is this? There was anger. I had to actually learn to feel anger. That was a thing for real.
Yeah.
Therapist told me, listen, unresolved anger can cause you to have liver problems. That was the theory of why did autoimmunity choose your liver, right? And I had some things I was working out and I literally didn't feel anger.
Wow.
And, I guess I was feeling it.
Yeah.
It was eating up my liver and calling itself PBC. But, I had to learn to engage with emotions that for a long time I'd kind of shut down. And I think that's something you see with a lot of people who get burnout is that they become detached, they become numb. They don't necessarily feel the ups or the downs. They just feel like they're going through the motions every day and they're tired and they're bored and nothing's interesting to them. And they detach from the people around them. I've been asked in a number of podcasts, how can I tell of people I'm working with for instance, are going through burnout. And one way you'll find it really fast is who's the person hiding behind a closed door more often or not engaging with people when they normally would have. And a lot of times that's the person who's suffering that, if you care, you need to reach out to that person and say, how are you doing? I've noticed that you haven't been engaged as much, is something the matter? They may or may not even realize something's the matter, but that's often something that happens pretty early.
Yeah. And it's interesting how many parallels there are with professionals because, in the same way, the dentist at the chair also cannot allow their emotions to emerge. The reactivity, defensiveness, feeling unsure, any of it. So I think we share that. And I think it's, to your point, difficult to unwind in regular life then. And so suppression of emotions, as we know, is definitely problematic for the human being. And so, to your point, you manifest these issues in your body. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good advice in terms of seeing who is sort of resigning a little bit from engagement. For me, I talk about burnout a lot. I make recommendations and I'm very open about my history with burnout, which unfortunately is not old history. It's as recent history as this past month, of going in and out of these phases. And the important thing to remember is your profession, your life, your responsibilities, all the things that are calling you may not be something you can escape in the moment, but you can start to be more aware when you start to sense and see your burnout features. And I always say burnout is very unique to each individual because the factors that cause it are so unique. And so I'm at least at a point where I can recognize when I'm sliding and at least try to correct in the moment, whether it's giving a little more time, whether maybe it's, having a discussion with someone that you trust. So, but anyway, I hear you, Michelle. And I'm really grateful for you that you've been able to get yourself in a position to help coach others and to help them sort of find what's going to light them up in their life. And so, with that as a sort of the next level of this interview, which is the part that I'm so excited to learn more about, is, when I first got in contact with you, this concept of the art of bending time. Can you just kind of walk us through the impetus of this, how it became, and what does it exactly mean? Because I think this is just such a beautiful nugget for any human being to have a greater mindset and understanding of what's possible with time. And I think you've been a great leader on this.
Okay, so there's a couple of ways of looking at it. As I mentioned before, we all have 24 hours. Everybody's 24 hours has 60 minutes in an hour. Everybody's, all that, right? But time isn't linear. And this is where we can bend it. So time is linear if you only look at it as a function of from how long is it from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. However, there are a lot of things you can do to impact the productivity of that hour, the joyfulness of that hour, what that hour does for your bigger picture, right? So one of the things that I work with people on really early, it's the first thing I do with coaching clients, and it's often the focal point of workshops with businesses and in keynotes, is talking about clarity and how you find clarity. Because if you know who you are and what lights you up, then you can start to work toward having that all the time. Not all the time, but as much as possible. So if you have that element, and I'm going to call it an element, I'll give you an example so you understand. So, like, for instance, lawyers sit in their chair all day, a lot. Okay. The lawyer who goes to court and walks around, and that happens like once a year if you're lucky. It's very unusual now to go to trial unless you're a certain, some lawyers go to trial a lot. If you're a prosecutor and your job is to go to court prosecuting things, even then though, they plea out way more cases than go to trial. So you don't spend a lot of time doing physically active things unless you make a point of it. And one thing I learned in doing my clarity exercise was I have people go through a process where they think about, it's like a meditation where they think about times in their life where they felt really happy, where they laughed so hard they couldn't stop laughing, where they felt very proud of an accomplishment. And I have them go into the details of that. So, really imagine yourself being in your 8-year-old body when you won your first swimming meet, or whatever that was for you that made you feel excited, made you feel proud, made you feel happy, made you feel lit up inside. And then we take that moment and we go, okay, so what was involved in that moment? Were you physically moving your body? Were you standing still? Did you get dressed up? Who were you with? What were you engaged with other people? Was it a team thing? Were there, so you're really looking at the elements of what was that thing that lit you up. And when you look at multiple events like that throughout your life, you start seeing commonalities and you start realizing that you may have, for instance, you may be somebody who loves to be in nature and to move your body, and your moments that you're thinking of don't involve other people at all. They involve hiking on a trail or going jogging on the beach when you're on vacation, or in my case, one of my most really defined moments that I can bring myself back to at any moment was at like 13, 14 years old, taking out the sunfish sailboat my family had on Cape Cod and sailing it in really rough conditions. And the waves were big and they were splashing on my face and the sun was really bright and I could feel my body moving with the boat. And that to me, like, I'm highly, highly kinesthetic. So that moment, like for me, I can still feel that in my body when I think about it. You see me, I'm moving my body when I'm talking about it, right? And as a lawyer, I wasn't getting that. And I realized that part of what I needed to get as a lawyer was just literally to get up and move my body more frequently, even if it was just to go for a walk around the block once in a while or to get up and work out every day, whether I wanted to work out or not. I realized I had to get that physical movement or I wasn't going to be happy and healthy because it was one of the things that lights me up. And if you don't have those things, you start to die inside. That's burnout. So if you start making a point of having more of those things that light you up, your time is going to feel better to you, right? What do we care about time for? We care about accomplishing the things that matter to us. We may have deadlines at work. We may have, in your case, in your work, you may have things that I need to get this done before this something sets and it has to be done in a certain amount of time, right? And you need focus during that time. And you're probably dealing with physical discomfort and whatever. While you're doing that, you can't focus on anything else. So what I have people do is I have them figure out what lights them up. And then we look into ways that we can get more of that. And then we look into ways we can make those moments, whether it's in our regular work or any other kind of moments, more focused and you get in the flow state more. So physical nutrition, exercise, and sleep are important for generating energy. And if you don't have energy, you don't have focus. So if you do those things, you're going to be able to have a bigger bang for your hour than if you're scrolling your phone because you got bored, losing things on your desk, whatever it is, that's a symptom of you not being focused.
Wow.
Then we get into mindset type of stuff. I mean, I've got about 5 different things that I walk people through in depth. And when you put all those things together, you're going to have a really much better ability to get more done in less time and to feel better while you're doing it.
So the way that you engage your time and the things that you're doing are critical to getting the most out of your time. And from what I'm hearing from you is it requires quite a bit of introspection and having someone to guide you through it and to coach you through it to really allow, like you said, you were starting to move and you were almost felt that the salty mist in your face being on the sailboat. You almost
Right.
need to relive that to really touch into what really does light you up. Is that kind of the first step in the process of bending time to your advantage is what I'm hearing, bending time
Yes.
to your own delight?
So the first step is getting that clarity. That is absolutely the cornerstone of everything else I do. Because if you have clarity, then you can build on that clarity and you can make sure you're doing things that resonate with who you are and what you want. One of the other things I do, and this is a higher level, more advanced part of what I teach people, is to do an analysis. We go through some basics about the first 6 weeks of a 12-week program. We're doing basics. And then we do a goal setting exercise and we choose 3 big, hairy goals, 3 goals for the next 5 years, something like that. Big professional goal, a big personal goal, and possibly another goal, whatever it is that resonates with you. And of course, everybody's different in these things. A lot of times the professional goal is going to be, I want to be an owner or a partner or depending on what their job is, it might be they want to start their own business. It might be they want to change jobs and they want to learn another skill, whatever that is for them. I work with them to look at that from a perspective it's similar to a business school SWOT analysis. So for those who have not gone to business school, which I had not, so my SWOT is SWOR because I translated it from Spanish, which is how I learned it. So you look at the strengths you have in the goal or the project or let's say you want to open your own practice. You might have some money saved, but you need more money. You might have contacts with a company that can help you with your back office stuff. You might have gotten an MBA and you have really good business school skills. You might have 3 people who want to come in with you. So you've got some employees, whatever it is, you put those strengths. Then you look at the weaknesses. What am I missing? Well, I need another $200,000 or $5 million or whatever it costs today to open a practice. I need advertising and marketing know-how. I don't know how to do that. I need a hygienist. I don't have a hygienist. My hygienist is staying at the place that I'm leaving. Whatever that might be, fill all that in. And then you have opportunities and risks. What are the benefits of having your own business, for instance? What kind of opportunity is that going to give you versus what are the risks? You're taking on debt. You're potentially opening yourself up to massive hours of work that you might not have had as an employee. Whatever those risks are for you, it might put pressure on your family, whatever that is. And after we've gone through that whole process and we've done it in great detail, I will then ask 1 to 10, how much do you want it? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? And you would be shocked how many people say, oh, I don't know, maybe a 6 or a 7. At which point we have a conversation about whether it's really worth all of that investment, all of that time, all of that mental energy to chase after a goal that maybe it wasn't your goal. Maybe it was your parents' goal. Maybe it was the 12-year-old Brett's goal to be an Olympic triathlete or whatever that was, right? Like there's some kind of a thing that, you got the idea somehow and it resonates with you on some level and you've carried it around with you for a really long time, but it may or may not be right for you today and for who you are today and for the future you that you envision for yourself. One piece of that time bending is literally ditching this stuff that's weighing you down. And those goals that don't withstand that test, a lot of times are things that have been weighing us down for years, physically, financially, mentally, and psychologically. We may be beating ourselves up because every year we say, I'm going to write that book this year. I'm going to write that book this year. And we haven't written it yet. Or I'm going to do XYZ, whatever the thing is. And, I'm going to lose that 10 pounds, 20 pounds. And you join the gym on January 1st and you go until January 5th, right? And you do it to yourself every year. And you're like, why am I even thinking about this?
Yeah, wow. I mean, in listening to this, first of all, how valuable of an exercise for all of us to really do. And I've always had this kind of idea that there are goals and there are dreams, and they aren't always the same thing, because oftentimes our goals are tied to metrics that are, metrics of success, whether it's monetary, whether it's lifestyle, even sometimes health. And I think that ultimately getting real with what we really, really want is not easy because it requires, as you're mentioning, to let go of so many things that have been ingrained to us as critical, foundational. Ultimately, someone might want to go sit still in a room for a month and not make any money or talk to anyone, but that solitude is something that would enlighten them spiritually. So I get it. I think this is extremely valuable to walk people through a process like this and to start to differentiate. Like you said, I've got this goal and I want to open a practice and this is what I need to do. Well, how bad do you want it? That's a
Yeah.
question.
And for it to be successful, you have to
You have
want
to
it.
want it bad.
And, do you want to be in it for a long time? Do you want to have people? Now, this is something that happened to me with my legal practice, frankly. I left a partnership where I had a very challenging situation there. And I left, I literally said to my ex-husband, I'm starting my own firm. I don't know if I hate being a lawyer or I hate this person who was my partner more. Like it was so toxic there
Yeah.
it was coloring. And I'd never had I'd always loved law before that. I'd loved the places I'd worked before that. And so I really was like, I left and I hit that point where I literally walked away with $30,000 in the bank and two contingency clients, which for the lawyers out there, that's like jumping off of a cliff with a napkin for a parachute. I did that because I felt like I had to at that point. And I continued to work as a lawyer, but for a very long time, I didn't grow my practice at all because I didn't want to entrap other people into a law firm when I wasn't sure I wanted to be a lawyer anymore. And that was when I started doing all these other things, the local politics and the this and the that, right? And ultimately, I always had a side thing that fueled me while I was practicing law. But by the time, what I realized was I really cut way back on the law. I didn't do as much of it as I would have if I'd been working employed by somebody else full time. And, you know, I was more or less working full time as a lawyer, like a regular person full time, not like lawyer full time. And then I had my side things that kept me fueled and happy.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's a perfectly okay way to live for a lot of people. Eventually, I hit a point where I was like, I drew a line in the sand and I said, I'm not taking any more clients. And I decided that I wanted to turn what I learned into a coaching practice. And then COVID happened. I took a case before COVID that just ended a year ago. It was 4.5 years in the
Wow.
court system before it was over. And I hung around and you mentioned, about that story. I told you that particular client knew when I signed him up that he was my last client and that I was only accepting him because the person who referred him to me was someone I really liked and who had called me 2 days after Christmas, by the way. While I was in the car on the way to my friend's wedding, I get this phone call from somebody saying, I got a call from this guy. He's a really nice guy. He's in a real jam. His insurance company won't pay to remove his catamaran off of a breakwater in the Dominican Republic that it ended up on. And the Navy in the Dominican is saying he can't leave the country until he deals with it. And so I got involved and ultimately we sold the salvage to somebody. He got to leave the country. Then he got sued by his insurance company. And I ended up involved in that until a year ago, but I stuck with him until the end because I really felt I was committed to doing that. And it turned out, by the end, I was loving what I was doing. I won 2 First Circuit appellate court rulings in the process. It was a lot of fun and it was probably the most fun I ever had in my entire law practice.
Well, it's good to end on a high note, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But everything you're describing, Michelle, all these moves you've made, they require courage. And
Yeah.
I believe what you're doing, what you're helping people with in finding clarity can often stimulate and drive the courage needed to make the move, to make
Yeah.
to make this life worth living, and not to live in
It's
misery.
huge. And the other thing is it doesn't necessarily require a move. And this is something where one of the things I do is speak to corporate groups and workshops. And obviously nobody wants to hire me to come in and tell their people all to quit their job. And the fact is they don't need to quit their job. For a lot of people, regaining clarity about why you're there in the first place, what it was about that career that attracted you, what it is about the work you do every day that you do enjoy, and then finding a way to get more of that and maybe refocus, maybe shift some things. Within teams, one thing we can do is acknowledge that some people have different things they're better at and that they like more. And if you can communicate enough that you can figure that out, then you can put your people in places where they get to do more of what they like.
Yeah. That,
You don't want to take somebody who's an introvert and say, hey, can you be the person who makes all the phone calls today?
mhm.
But that happens all the time, right? Because people don't bother to find out that the person who's the introvert doesn't really want to make the phone calls half the day. And the person who's over there like cleaning instruments is actually really gregarious and would be great on the phone. Like it could be that you just move some people around for part of their day or for part of their responsibilities and you can have a happier team
Yeah.
that works better together.
That's beautiful. And I've, as I mentioned, I've interviewed a number of guests that have walked and, left their profession. And I've had others that have found ways to reconfigure so that
Yeah.
you can still continue to do what you have joy in doing and enjoy, but also as your work and not have it bring down the rest of your life. And oftentimes, most of them have found other things to diversify their time and attention, to your point, that light them up. So I guess the art of bending time can be, an individual thing, but I love this idea. And what I'm trying to represent on this podcast is a bridge between, sort of not having to change everything in your life to find fulfillment, but maybe tweak it. And I think to your point, finding clarity is probably that very first step in doing so. Michelle, we talked about this privately, but I'm also curious, how can mentorship be sort of a propellant for someone to, in essence, get closer to that life of their own design or get closer to living with their career in a way in which they still are feeling excited and fulfilled? What does mentorship mean to you in that realm?
I think mentorship is huge, and it's something that sadly we're not often just given when we walk into, even in a place, if you walk in and you work in an environment where you have a mentor assigned to you, that's often not the right person to be your mentor, right? You don't often find a mentor in the context of that person happens to be your boss or they happen to sit down the hall or whatever. You may or may not find mentorship there. I actually had a mentor when I worked in DC who was a gentleman I met through the BU Law Alumni Association, and he was the founding partner of a firm across the street. And we had lunch together every week. I'd see him frequently. And, it was great because I could take the in my office problems outside my office to talk to somebody who could give me advice from a distance, who wasn't trying to protect somebody or trying to, deal with internal politics or whatever. He could tell me it from that outsider perspective, which was very helpful. One of the things I do in my program is once we do that analysis of the goals, the next thing we do is build a dream team. And part of what that entails is crossing the line between and work and life. I hate the phrase work-life balance. I think it's a myth and I think it's destructive, and it causes people to feel like failures in every aspect of their lives. Because when you try to have this mindset of, I'm going to work these certain hours, or I'm going to have this certain amount of time at home, or however you parse that out, you're never going to be able to do it right and be great at home or great at work. But you can be great at all of it if you learn how to integrate it right.
Mm.
So one of the things that I suggest people do is to proactively speak to people at work about their personal goal and speak to people in their personal life about a work goal. And what that does is it gives you, typically you wouldn't do that, right? A lot of times now it's almost taboo. God forbid you socialize with the person from work because you're supposed to keep work separate from life. Bosses feel uncomfortable inviting an employee over now because it's somehow an intrusion on their private life. But the fact is, how do you make friends and get to know people if you don't socialize? So what I do is I suggest, okay, whatever your big goal is, go to work tomorrow and ask some of the people you know at work, do you know anybody who's ever done this? Let's say you want to become a private pilot and no one in your family is a pilot. You don't know anything about how to go about it, except you have this perception that it's very expensive and that it's going to take a huge amount of time that you don't have because you work so hard. Right. But if you go to work and you find somebody who has a cousin who's a pilot or a brother who's a pilot or their spouse is a pilot, you may find advice about how to get to it quicker, easier, less expensively. I use this as an example because I learned from a friend of mine here in Miami who took me on, took me on a date to Key West to eat crabs on a Cessna one day, that there are clubs that have planes and it's way less expensive, and they have volunteers who do a lot of the work. And a lot of the people who are part of this club in Miami are, former pilots who want to have access to a plane, or they're mechanics, or there's a lot of people who do this and who make it more reasonably priced and more fun. There's a social circle around it. You're not just going and spending tens of thousands of dollars to go to some flight school and then have them suggest you buy your own plane and you're alone in it. you're actually doing it as part of a group. So that's one suggestion I make is go ask about these things because you never know what somebody you know knows or who they can introduce you to. And don't limit it to people at your level, for instance. It might not be another dentist in your practice who has this knowledge. It might be the receptionist, right? Because we don't know who people's family members are. We don't know what they've done personally before they got there. So that's it. I recommend that to everybody and to cross over and create a web.
Hmm.
And I have a toy. I'm going to show you my toy. This is my toy. It's my dog's toy actually, but I've requisitioned it for my new business. So essentially, that person at work is over here, and you might have had to go from here to get your pilot's license. But when you talk to that person and they put you in contact with somebody who knows something, you might have shortened it to that distance.
Hmm.
That's spending time.
I love that. I love that.
So, and you can do that in so many different ways, but that's the concept. You're taking what could be a long time on a linear level and you're finding ways to grab pieces of the fabric, so to speak, and bring them together so that you have a shorter path.
And proximity to your dream may be just one conversation or question away, right? Yeah.
Exactly. It could be that the person you know is a flight instructor and says, "Hey, I could take you out," right? Like, who knows?
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant. Wow, just, it's just so refreshing to kind of hear you having kind of come through your own journey, have this what sounds like a really great system in place in terms of a program. So, Michelle, tell us, where can our audience find you? What are your current offerings? And what I'm trying to do with this, I'm not trying, what I am doing with the podcast, it's all self-talk, right? Is to
Hmm.
create a community of support, of mentorship. And so, where can our audience find you in an effort to learn more about the art of bending time, your workshops, and your coaching?
Okay. So I have an online community. And in that online community, I have tools like a download of the audio for the clarity exercise and a journaling prompt sheet. And I do some workshops in there. Like we're doing something actually on Friday this week. I'm calling it halftime locker room chat for 2025. So the idea is it's super casual. Let's talk about what our goals are and where are we and what can we do to get that to happen during this year because we're halfway through the year already.
Hmm.
It's amazing. But so I do things like that regularly. So there are opportunities to be part of those things and those are all free. I'm also starting a new coaching cohort for soon, like in the next few weeks, because I think summer's a really good time for this. And a lot of times if you're starting off in the summer, you've got a little more time. People are a little laid back. They're not as driven. They're not as busy. The goals tend to fall back. But so you have a little more me time to be able to focus on some of this stuff. So I'm starting a coaching group and that coaching group's going to start mid next month and I'll be doing that monthly. So, I try not to make a group bigger than 8 or 10 people. If it goes bigger than 10, I'll break it out and we'll make multiple groups because I think groups are better than individual coaching. I've just found in my own experience, you learn from the other people too. And you're not always your example may not be the same as their example, but when somebody brings something up, a lot of times it's something that might resonate with you in a way that you wouldn't have thought of it yourself, but it helped. And so I like that format. I do individual coaching if people want it because some people aren't comfortable with
Mhm.
talking about personal things in front of a bunch of people. And that's fine. And, it's awesome. I love it when I can do it. But I do feel like groups are actually, in some ways, they're better.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
So, but what they can do is they can text the word clarity. So if you're watching this podcast, pull out your phone. And I never advise people to pull out their phone for anything, but pull out your phone and go into your text and text the word clarity to the number 33777. And that'll put you on a sign up form so that you can become part of that community. And then you get access to all of the tools that are in there.
That's beautiful, Michelle. And we're going to link up all your socials and we'll link up the text link and your website as well. So it's really exciting. And I agree. I think community can be a great situation for coaching, for personal work. There's a place for one on one as well. So I'm glad that you're offering that. I have just one closing question, Michelle, before we close out this beautiful episode in which we've bent time to learning and to sharing and helping others. But so there's an individual in front of you. They're 18 years old, whatever that looks like. Could
Okay.
be whatever it is, but this 18-year-old just kind of has a fire in their belly. They recognize that they want to, make an impact in their life. They want to, be someone that they can be proud of down the road as they envision their life. What's one piece of tangible advice that you might offer to this person as sort of one thing that they could do right now to get moving in the direction of which they hope to travel?
I would say this clarity exercise to start out and to learn about their purpose. I have an assessment I do with my clients that's available as well. I actually haven't put it up on my website yet, but I will be putting it up. It's a brand new assessment called the Purpose Factor Assessment, and it's brilliant. It takes about half an hour and it gives you really good information about what your innate skills are, what your learned skills are, what your core values are. It really gives you this good picture, tells you how how your personality best leads other people and is led by other people, which one of the things I think if I had to talk to my 18-year-old self, I would tell my 18-year-old self to understand and learn how to work with people better and to not take things so personally.
Mhm.
Because I think, especially at that age, I did not understand how to connect and how to understand and how to know that it isn't, kids at that age, they still think it's all about them and for the most part. And if you really have to broaden your viewpoint to understand that there's a bigger picture. And if you're in a work situation, a lot of times the junior person isn't being given the big picture. And, that's a piece of advice I would give is ask where you fit into the big picture and what can you do that's important, that matters, and do the best you can at it, even if what you're doing right now is washing dishes in a restaurant or whatever your role is. Every role matters. Every role is crucially important. If you're a restaurant and your dishes have water spots on them, you're not getting your Michelin star, right? That's the dishwasher. And that dishwasher could literally cost you a significant level of success
Yeah.
in that business.
Yeah.
So everybody's role matters. And I think that's something I see with a lot of the younger kids is they think they're supposed to be the founder, the CEO, the like right away. But you can't do that without the skills behind it. So get the skills and get good at the skills and get good at things you love.
And I would add to that, with the taking things personally, is that the feedback that we receive is oftentimes the actual breadcrumbs to our dreams. It's just sometimes so hard to hear that, we can't get past it. And so I'll add that. Yeah. So, Michelle Niemeyer, it has been such a pleasure getting to know you. I'm so appreciative of your time and your expertise and sharing. And, we're kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of, I think, the way that we're looking at life and wanting to help other people. And it all starts with helping yourself. I believe our first
Exactly.
coaching client is always sitting right inside of our skin. And I'm grateful for you for all the success you've had in terms of regaining control of your health, of your time, and then being able to help others do the same. So I hope our community will reach out to you and really look forward to some future collaborations together.
Thank you, Brett. This has been great.
Awesome.